Have you ever had a brilliant idea in your head, but the moment you opened your mouth, everything collapsed? Your mind went blank, your words came out weak, and the opportunity was gone. This book is not about talking more. It is about thinking faster under pressure, organizing your thoughts in seconds, and speaking with clarity when it matters most. From job interviews to difficult conversations, from public speaking to everyday life, this is the skill that silently separates confident leaders from people who are constantly misunderstood. Stay with me, because by the end of this audiobook, the way you think and speak in critical moments will never be the same. Chapter 1. Thinking before speaking. Imagine standing in a meeting where everyone looks confident and ready, while your mind feels like a messy desk full of scattered papers. This chapter begins with a simple truth most people ignore. Speaking well does not start with the mouth. It starts with the mind. Many people believe fast speakers are born talented, but the reality is quieter and more practical. The author explains that strong communicators slow down internally even when the situation feels urgent. They do not rush to talk. They create mental structure first. Picture a firefighter entering a burning building. He does not run blindly. He scans the room, chooses a path, and then moves fast. Your brain works the same way when you train it. In this chapter, we follow the story of a young manager who kept failing in presentations, not because he lacked knowledge, but because his thoughts raced without order. He learned a simple habit, pausing for a breath, and silently naming his main idea before speaking. That pause changed everything. His words became clearer, his confidence rose, and people listened. The chapter shows how the brain loves patterns. When you give it a simple internal roadmap, your voice follows naturally. You learn how to group thoughts into meaning instead of sentences. You see examples from interviews, arguments, and public talks where one calm mental frame saved the speaker from embarrassment. The lesson is repeated gently through story after story. You do not need more vocabulary. You need fewer thoughts at one time. The chapter closes with a powerful reminder: speed in speaking comes from clarity, not panic. When you think clearly, your words arrive on time. Every time. Chapter 2, Organizing Ideas in Seconds. This chapter feels like a mental toolkit built for real-life pressure. The author opens with a scene of a job interview where the question seems simple, but the mind freezes. The problem is not fear, it is overload. To fix this, the chapter introduces a mental organizing habit that works in seconds. It teaches you to compress ideas into short mental shapes instead of long explanations. You follow the journey of a lawyer who learned to answer complex questions with calm precision by mentally sorting his ideas before speaking. The chapter explains that listeners do not want everything. They want the right thing. When you organize your thoughts quickly, you respect the attention of others. You learn how to mentally frame responses using purpose instead of memory. Real examples show how leaders answer unexpected questions without sounding rehearsed. The secret is not preparation of sentences, but preparation of thinking. The chapter also explores everyday conversations where people talk too much because they are thinking out loud. You are shown how silence becomes a strategic tool. A short pause creates authority and gives your brain space to choose what matters. The author shares moments from classrooms, boardrooms, and casual talks where clarity won respect. The chapter ends with a strong message. Organization is kindness. When you organize your thoughts, you make it easier for others to understand and trust you. Chapter 3. Speaking with confidence. Under pressure is where communication skills are truly tested. This chapter dives into moments where emotions rise and clarity drops. You are placed inside difficult conversations, feedback sessions, conflicts, and public mistakes. The author explains that confidence is not loudness, it is stability. You read about a doctor delivering bad news calmly, because he trained his thinking before training his words. The chapter shows how stress narrows the mind and how skilled speakers expand it intentionally. Simple techniques are woven into stories where people regain control by focusing on one clear message instead of defending themselves. The author emphasizes emotional awareness, knowing what you feel without letting it speak for you. You see how confident speakers acknowledge emotion without drowning in it. Real-life examples include negotiations where calm clarity changed outcomes, and personal conversations where honesty replaced panic. The chapter highlights that confidence grows when you trust your thinking process. You stop fearing questions because you know how to respond, even when you do not know the answer perfectly. The chapter closes with a quiet, powerful truth. People do not remember perfect words. They remember how you made them feel. When you think clearly and speak with intention, you create safety and trust, and that is the highest form of confidence. Chapter 4. Listening as a communication. Superb over. Most people think communication is about talking faster or sounding smarter. But this chapter flips the table completely and shows that real power comes from listening with intention. The chapter opens with a vivid story of a startup founder who kept losing deals not because his product was weak, but because he was busy preparing his next sentence while others were speaking. When he learned to truly listen, everything changed. Listening here is not passive silence, it is an active mental process. The author explains that when you listen deeply, your brain collects patterns, emotions, and hidden concerns. This allows you to respond with precision instead of noise. We see examples from therapy rooms, negotiation tables, and everyday friendships where one thoughtful response created trust instantly. The chapter teaches that great listeners ask fewer but better questions. They do not interrupt to impress. They interrupt only to clarify meaning. You follow the story of a school teacher who transformed her classroom by listening to what students meant, not just what they said. By reflecting ideas back, she made people feel seen, and that made her words more impactful later. The author explains how listening slows the conversation just enough for insight to appear. In high-pressure environments, listening creates calm because people feel respected. The chapter also explores how ego blocks listening. When we listen to reply, we miss the message. When we listen to understand, we gain influence. Real examples show executives who gained loyalty by repeating one simple habit, summarizing before responding. This chapter emphasizes that listening buys you time to think, and thinking buys you better words. Chapter 5. Connecting emotion and clarity. This chapter dives into the emotional layer of communication where words meet human experience. It begins with a powerful scene of a leader delivering a technically perfect speech that left everyone cold. The problem was not logic, it was lack of connection. The author explains that people decide with emotion and justify with logic. If your message has no emotional anchor, it drifts away. The chapter introduces the idea that clarity without emotion feels empty, while emotion without clarity feels chaotic. You need both. You follow the journey of a young professional who struggled to motivate her team until she learned to frame ideas through shared values and real stories. By speaking to what people cared about, she unlocked engagement instantly. The chapter shows how stories act as emotional bridges. They turn abstract ideas into lived moments. You see examples of doctors, engineers, and entrepreneurs using simple human stories to make complex ideas unforgettable. The author explains that emotional connection does not mean exaggeration. It means honesty. You learn how to name emotions without being dramatic and how that builds trust. The chapter also covers difficult conversations where clarity and empathy must coexist. Real-life scenarios show how acknowledging fear, frustration, or hope before delivering information changes how it is received. The author emphasizes that emotion sharpens memory. When people feel something, they remember what you said and why it mattered. The chapter teaches practical mental habits, like asking why this matters to them before speaking. This shifts your message from self-focused to audience-centered. The chapter closes with a strong reminder: communication is not about proving intelligence. It is about creating understanding. When clarity meets emotion, your words do not just inform, they move people. And that is how messages last long after the conversation ends. Chapter 6. Thinking under pressure without losing your voice. This chapter steps straight into the moment. Everyone fears the moment when all eyes turn to you and your mind suddenly goes blank. It opens with a relatable scene. A professional asked an unexpected question in a meeting, feeling the heat rise, heart racing, seconds stretching into eternity. The author explains that pressure does not kill thinking, panic does. When the brain senses threat, it shifts into survival mode, shutting down creative language and complex reasoning. This chapter is about regaining control in that exact moment. You are guided through how high performers train their minds to pause instead of panic. The pause is not silence born of fear, but silence born of choice. Real examples show journalists, politicians, and executives who learn to buy time with calm, framing sentences that sound natural while the brain organizes thoughts. The author explains that thinking fast is not about speed, it is about structure. When you have mental frameworks ready, your brain grabs them under stress like muscle memory. You follow the story of a trial lawyer who never memorized answers but memorized patterns, opening, framing, concluding. This allowed him to speak clearly even when surprised. The chapter introduces the idea of verbal scaffolding, short phrases that give your mind breathing room while keeping the listener engaged. You see how simple acknowledgments turn pressure into collaboration rather than confrontation. The author also explores the inner voice and how negative self-talk sabotages thinking under pressure. By reframing moments as conversations, not performances, anxiety drops and clarity rises. The chapter emphasizes preparation that is flexible, not scripted. You learn how rehearsing ideas instead of sentences gives freedom. Real-life examples from classrooms, boardrooms, and media interviews show that the best speakers sound natural because they are adaptable, not because they are perfect. The chapter also highlights the physical side-breathing posture and pace, showing how the body leads the mind under stress. Slowing your breath slows your thoughts and gives you access to language again. The chapter ends with a powerful insight. Pressure moments are not tests of intelligence, they are tests of presence. When you stay present, your words find their way, and when your words flow, confidence follows. Chapter 7. Turning every conversation into influence. This chapter brings everything together and shifts the focus from speaking well to making impact. It opens with a simple but powerful idea. Every conversation either builds influence or wastes it. The difference is intention. You are introduced to a story of two colleagues with equal expertise. One was constantly ignored, the other consistently persuasive. The difference was not authority, but approach. The author explains that influence is not manipulation, it is alignment. When people feel understood, they open up. When they open up, your ideas land. The chapter explores how great communicators adapt their message to the moment, the person, and the goal. You learn that influence begins before words are spoken through curiosity, attention, and respect. Real-world examples show leaders who asked better questions instead of pushing harder and achieved better outcomes. The author explains how framing shapes perception. The same idea presented differently can feel like a threat or an opportunity. You follow a negotiation story where a single reframing shifted resistance into agreement. This chapter also dives into conversational momentum, how to guide dialogue naturally without dominating it. You see how small verbal cues signal confidence and openness at the same time. The author emphasizes consistency, saying what you mean and meaning what you say, because credibility compounds over time. The chapter discusses how influence grows when actions match words, giving examples of managers who earned trust by listening, following through, and communicating clearly even when the message was hard. You learn how to close conversations with purpose, leaving people clear on next steps and emotionally settled. The author explains that endings matter because they shape memory. The chapter also addresses digital communication, showing how clarity and tone matter even more when voice and body language are absent. Simple changes in wording can turn cold messages into collaborative ones. The chapter closes with a strong reflection: communication mastery is not about winning arguments, it is about moving people forward together. When you think clearly, speak intentionally, and listen deeply, every conversation becomes an opportunity to lead, without forcing, and influence without shouting. This is where communication stops being a skill and becomes a quiet form of power. Chapter 9. Thinking fast without losing. Your DPTH. This chapter dives into one of the most demanded skills in modern communication: the ability to think fast without sounding shallow, rushed, or defensive. It begins by dismantling a common myth that quick thinkers are naturally smarter or more articulate. The author makes it clear that fast thinking is not about speed, but about structure. People who respond well under pressure are not pulling answers from nowhere. They are navigating familiar mental pathways built through practice, awareness, and intention. The chapter opens with a scene many people fear: being asked an unexpected question in a meeting, interview, or live conversation where silence feels dangerous. You are shown how most people panic, not because they do not know the answer, but because they try to find the perfect answer instantly. This pressure collapses thinking. The author reframes silence as a strategic pause rather than a failure, and explains that even a brief moment of reflection improves clarity and credibility. The chapter introduces the idea of cognitive anchors, simple internal frameworks that help you organize thoughts quickly. These anchors might be values, experiences, or principles that guide your response. When you know what matters, your mind filters noise faster. Real examples are shared, including a manager who learned to answer tough questions by anchoring responses to company priorities rather than personal emotion. This shift transformed stressful conversations into controlled dialogues. The author explains how emotions hijack speed. When anxiety spikes, your brain narrows focus and limits access to language. The solution offered is emotional labeling, quietly naming what you feel to reduce its intensity. This technique allows you to regain mental bandwidth and respond with intention rather than reflex. The chapter explores the difference between reacting and responding. Reactiveness is driven by fear, ego, or urgency, while response is guided by purpose. You learn how to slow the internal process, even when the external moment feels fast. The author emphasizes that thinking fast does not mean answering immediately. It means answering deliberately. The chapter presents a powerful technique: reframing questions before answering them. By restating or slightly reshaping a question, you buy time, clarify intent, and guide the conversation. This is illustrated through examples from media interviews and negotiations where skilled communicators took control without confrontation. You also learn the value of modular thinking, preparing adaptable ideas that can fit multiple contexts instead of memorized scripts. This allows you to speak fluidly even when the situation changes. The chapter highlights how storytelling accelerates thinking because stories already have structure. When you respond with a brief narrative, your brain follows a natural sequence, beginning, tension, and resolution. This reduces cognitive load and increases engagement. A story about a teacher handling a disruptive classroom question shows how narrative turned chaos into connection. The author also addresses overthinking, which often slows responses more than lack of knowledge. You are shown how the need to be impressive blocks authenticity. The chapter encourages aiming for useful rather than perfect answers. Usefulness builds trust. Perfection builds distance. You are guided through examples where simple, honest responses had more impact than complex explanations. The chapter explains how curiosity fuels fast thinking. When you listen fully instead of planning your reply, your brain processes information more efficiently. Active listening becomes a shortcut to better answers. The author provides a vivid example of a doctor who improved patient communication by focusing on understanding before explaining. The chapter also explores linguistic shortcuts, such as signposting phrases that give your mind time to organize thoughts while keeping the listener engaged. These phrases are not fillers, but bridges that maintain flow. The author stresses that fast thinking improves with exposure, not avoidance. The more you practice speaking in uncertain moments, the more familiar they become. This familiarity trains your nervous system to stay calm. The chapter closes with a grounded truth. Thinking fast is not about being clever on demand. It is about trusting your ability to navigate uncertainty. When you accept that you do not need perfect answers, only clear, honest ones, your mind opens, your voice steadies, and you discover that speed comes naturally when fear steps aside. Chapter 10. Speaking with Clarity. When the press your is high. This chapter explores what happens to communication when stakes rise and eyes turn toward you. The core idea is simple but uncomfortable. Pressure does not create confusion, it reveals it. When people stumble under pressure, it is rarely because they lack ideas, but because those ideas are unorganized. The author opens with the familiar scene. A professional asked to explain something important in a limited time while others wait. Expectations rise, breathing shortens, and thoughts scatter. The chapter explains that clarity under pressure is a skill that can be trained, not a personality trait. Clarity begins before you speak. It starts with knowing what you are really trying to say. The author introduces the concept of a central message, a single sentence that represents the heart of your response. When pressure hits, your brain looks for an anchor, and that sentence becomes your anchor. The chapter shows how speakers who define their central message beforehand remain composed even when interrupted, challenged, or rushed. A vivid example is given of a startup founder pitching to investors who lost his slides mid-presentation, yet delivered a compelling explanation because he knew his core message by heart. The chapter emphasizes subtraction over addition under pressure. The instinct is to say more to sound convincing, but clarity improves when you say less. You learn how to strip explanations down to their essentials without losing meaning. The author explains how the brain under stress has limited capacity, so simplicity becomes a form of respect for your listener. The chapter dives into the role of structure. Simple patterns such as problem, insight, action help organize thoughts quickly. This structure allows listeners to follow even when the topic is complex. Real-world examples from emergency responders and executives show how structure maintains authority in chaotic moments. The chapter also addresses vocal clarity. How you say something often matters more than what you say. Slower pace, intentional pauses, and steady volume communicate confidence even when you feel uncertain. The author explains that listeners interpret calm delivery as competence, even if the content is evolving. You are shown how pausing is not a weakness, but a signal of control. The chapter explores mental clutter, one of the biggest enemies of clarity. Internal noise, such as self-judgment, fear of being wrong, or concern about appearance, competes with your message. The solution offered is external focus. Shift attention from yourself to the value you are delivering. This reduces anxiety and sharpens expression. A powerful story is shared about a teacher who overcame stage fright by focusing on helping one student rather than impressing a classroom. The chapter introduces the concept of verbal signposts, phrases that guide listeners through your thinking. These phrases increase clarity while buying you time to think. They are not fillers, but directional cues. The author explains how skilled communicators guide attention intentionally instead of letting it drift. The chapter also explores handling interruptions. When pressure rises, interruptions feel threatening. You are shown how to acknowledge, redirect, and regain flow without defensiveness. This skill preserves clarity and authority. The chapter closes by reinforcing that clarity under pressure is not about control over the situation, but control over your intention. When you know why you are speaking and what you want to leave behind, your words align naturally. Pressure becomes a spotlight, not a trap, revealing preparation rather than exposing fear. Chapter 11. Listening as the hidden engine of MRT speech. This chapter flips a common assumption that speaking well is about talking more or faster. The author argues that the smartest speakers are often the best listeners. Listening is presented not as a passive act, but as an active strategic skill that directly improves how you think and respond. The chapter opens with an example of a negotiation that failed, not because of poor arguments, but because neither side truly listened. The author explains that most people listen to reply, not to understand. This habit limits insight and weakens responses. The chapter introduces the idea that listening creates cognitive advantage. When you listen fully, your brain gathers context, emotion, and intention, which allows you to respond with precision rather than guesswork. You learn how listening reduces mental load because you are not multitasking between hearing and planning. The chapter explores different levels of listening. Surface listening catches words, while deep listening catches meaning, emotion, and subtext. The author explains how deep listening reveals what people really care about, which is often unstated. A story is shared of a manager who resolved conflict by identifying the unspoken concern behind an employee complaint. This insight came only through attentive listening. The chapter explains how good listening shapes better questions. Questions become sharper, more relevant, and more respectful. This improves dialogue and builds trust. The author emphasizes that powerful communication is often about asking the right question at the right moment, rather than delivering the perfect statement. The chapter explores listening cues, eye contact, posture, silence, and acknowledgement. These signals tell the speaker they are heard, which encourages openness and clarity. The author explains that people think better when they feel heard, which improves the quality of information you receive. The chapter also addresses distractions. Internal distractions such as assumptions bias and impatience distort listening. You are shown how to notice these mental habits and gently release them. The author introduces the practice of listening for patterns rather than details. This allows you to grasp the essence of what is being said, even in long or emotional conversations. The chapter discusses how listening improves persuasion. When people feel understood, they become more receptive. This is illustrated through examples from counseling, sales, and leadership. The author explains that agreement is not required, understanding is. The chapter highlights reflective listening, summarizing what you heard to confirm accuracy. This technique prevents misunderstandings and demonstrates respect. The chapter also explores listening under pressure. When emotions run high, listening becomes harder, yet more valuable. You are shown how slowing your breath and softening your focus improves comprehension. The chapter closes with a powerful insight. Smart speech is built on strong listening. When you listen well, you respond with relevance. empathy, and clarity. This transforms conversations from performances into connections. Listening becomes the quiet force that sharpens thinking, steadies emotion, and turns communication into a shared experience rather than a competition. Chapter 12. Thinking on your feet without losing your mind. This chapter dives into one of the most intimidating moments in communication, the moment you are asked to respond without preparation. The author reframes this fear by explaining that thinking on your feet is not about speed, but about trust. Trust in your ability to organize thoughts quickly, and trust that imperfect answers delivered calmly are more effective than perfect answers delivered too late. The chapter opens with a familiar situation, a sudden question in a meeting that pulls attention toward you. The pressure is instant, yet the author explains that panic comes not from the question itself, but from the belief that you must respond flawlessly. The chapter introduces a powerful mindset shift: you are allowed to think out loud. This single idea reduces cognitive load and buys time while increasing clarity. The author explains how verbalizing your thinking helps both you and your listener follow the logic together. Real examples from executives and educators show how transparent thinking builds credibility rather than weakening it. The chapter introduces simple mental frameworks that can be accessed quickly. These frameworks act like mental shelves where ideas can be placed in real time. One such approach is situational framing, where you briefly restate the question in your own words. This confirms understanding and gives your brain a moment to organize. The chapter explains that repetition is not stalling, it is alignment. Another technique explored is prioritization. You are shown how to identify the most important point first, rather than attempting to cover everything. This prevents rambling and sharpens impact. The author emphasizes that under pressure, relevance matters more than completeness. The chapter explores emotional regulation as a thinking tool. When stress rises, the body reacts faster than the mind. You learn how controlled breathing posture and tone send calming signals back to the brain. This physiological regulation improves access to memory and reasoning. The author shares a story of a lawyer who learned to slow his speech to regain control of his thoughts during cross-examination. The chapter also discusses how to handle uncertainty. You do not need to have all the answers. The author explains how acknowledging uncertainty while offering direction maintains trust. Phrases that express curiosity and openness are shown to be more effective than defensive certainty. The chapter explores how preparation still matters, even for spontaneous moments. Preparation does not mean scripting responses, but building familiarity with ideas and values. This creates a mental library you can draw from quickly. The chapter highlights the role of practice. Mock conversations, reflection, and review strengthen mental agility. The chapter also addresses fear of judgment. This fear narrows thinking and accelerates speech. You learn how shifting focus from self-evaluation to contribution expands mental space. The author closes by reminding the reader that thinking on your feet is a skill built through permission, not pressure. When you allow yourself to pause, explore, and speak imperfectly, you unlock clarity even in unexpected moments. The goal is not brilliance, but presence, and presence makes thinking visible and effective. Chapter 13. Communicating with confidence when you feel uncertain. This chapter tackles a paradox many people experience, feeling unsure internally while needing to project confidence externally. The author begins by dismantling a myth. Confidence is not the absence of doubt, but the ability to move forward despite it. The chapter opens with a story of a leader who admitted uncertainty while guiding a team through change. This honesty strengthened trust rather than weakening authority. The author explains that audiences do not expect certainty, they expect steadiness. The chapter explores how confidence is communicated less through words and more through delivery. Elements such as pace, posture, eye focus, and vocal tone shape perception more than content. You learn that slowing down signals control even when you are unsure. The author explains that rushing is often interpreted as anxiety, while pauses are interpreted as thoughtfulness. The chapter introduces the concept of grounded confidence. This type of confidence comes from clarity of intent rather than certainty of outcome. When you know why you are speaking, your message carries weight, even if answers evolve. The chapter explores language choices that project confidence without arrogance. Clear declarative statements, balanced with openness, invite trust. The author contrasts this with overqualification, which weakens impact. The chapter provides examples of how subtle wording shifts change perception dramatically. The chapter also discusses the role of self-talk. Internal dialogue shapes external expression. You learn how negative self-narration undermines confidence before you speak. The author introduces techniques to reframe internal messages into supportive cues. These cues anchor you in capability rather than fear. The chapter explores body awareness. Confidence is felt before it is seen. Grounding your stance, relaxing shoulders, and breathing deeply create a physical foundation that supports mental clarity. The author shares how performers and speakers use body alignment to regulate emotion and presence. The chapter addresses mistakes and missteps. Confidence is not about avoiding them, but about handling them gracefully. You learn how acknowledging a slip and continuing calmly preserves credibility more than pretending it did not happen. The chapter explores authenticity as a confidence amplifier. When your communication aligns with your values, it feels natural and convincing. The author explains that people sense when words are borrowed rather than owned. Owning your perspective, even when uncertain, builds trust. The chapter also discusses confidence in difficult conversations. Setting boundaries, delivering feedback, and expressing disagreement require calm firmness. You are shown how to separate respect from agreement and how to maintain composure when emotions rise. The chapter closes with a powerful reminder. Confidence is a practice, not a personality trait. It grows through repetition, reflection, and self-permission. When you stop trying to sound confident and start focusing on being clear, honest, and present, confidence emerges naturally. Your voice steadies, your message lands, and uncertainty becomes a companion, not an obstacle. Chapter 15. Communicating under pressure without losing your mind. When pressure enters a conversation, most people shrink. Their voice tightens. Their thoughts scatter. Their confidence leaks out word by word. This chapter is about mastering communication when your heart rate rises and your brain feels like it is sprinting ahead of you. Because real communication power is not tested in calm moments. It is tested when stakes are high and time is short. Think about the last time you were put on the spot. A sudden question in a meeting. A confrontation you did not expect. A moment when all eyes turned toward you and silence demanded an answer. In that instant, your brain did not ask, "What is the best response?" It asked, "How do I survive this?" This is biology, not weakness. Under pressure, your nervous system shifts into protection mode. Blood flow moves away from reasoning areas and toward survival systems. Words become harder to access, not because you lack intelligence, but because your body believes you are under threat. The key is not to eliminate pressure. That is impossible. The key is to train your response to it. High performers do not think faster under pressure. They think simpler. They create internal structures that guide them when emotions are loud. One powerful technique is mental framing. Before speaking, you silently define the situation. Is this a problem to solve? A message to clarify? A relationship to protect? This framing acts like a compass. It narrows your focus and prevents mental overload. Another critical skill is controlled pacing. Under stress, people rush. They speak faster, hoping speed will hide uncertainty. It does the opposite. Slowing down creates authority. A short pause before answering signals confidence, even if you feel nervous inside. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. The audience fills it with attention instead of judgment. Breath is your hidden weapon. Shallow breathing tells your brain danger is present. Deep, steady breathing tells it you are safe. One slow breath before responding can reset your nervous system enough to retrieve clear language. This is not meditation fluff. It is physiology. Executives, athletes, and negotiators all rely on breath control to stay sharp under pressure. Story structure also matters. When stressed, the brain struggles to organize thoughts. Instead of improvising everything, build responses around simple structures. Situation, action, outcome. Problem, insight, solution. Past, present, future. These frameworks act like rails, keeping your message on track even when emotions try to derail it. Pressure often triggers fear of judgment. The mind becomes obsessed with how you appear rather than what you communicate. Shift attention outward. Focus on the listener's need, not your performance. When your goal becomes helping instead of impressing, anxiety loosens its grip. Practice is non-negotiable. You do not rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of preparation. Rehearse difficult conversations aloud. Simulate pressure. Ask yourself hard questions and answer them standing up. Train your brain to access language under stress before real stakes appear. The final truth is simple. Confidence under pressure is not about talent. It is about familiarity. When your mind recognizes the situation, it stops panicking. And when panic fades, clarity steps forward. This is how you speak when it matters most. Not by being perfect, but by being present, calm, and intentional. Chapter 16. Thinking clearly. While speaking fast, speed is seductive. In conversations, speed feels like intelligence, and silence feels like danger. When a question comes suddenly, many people rush to answer, believing that the fastest response wins respect. In reality, clarity wins trust, and clarity rarely lives in haste. This chapter is about how to think clearly while speaking fast without sounding scattered, uncertain, or reactive. Real life does not give you time-outs. Meetings move quickly. Discussions overlap. Decisions are demanded in real time. The challenge is not to slow the world down, but to build a mind that stays ordered even when the pace accelerates. Clear thinkers are not faster talkers. They are better filters. The first skill is internal sorting. When information hits you, your mind receives more than it needs. Facts, emotions, assumptions, and noise arrive together. The disciplined communicator immediately asks one silent question: what actually matters here? This question cuts through excess. It selects one idea instead of 10, one direction instead of chaos. When you speak from one idea, your words align naturally. The listener feels coherence even if the answer is brief. Rambling is not caused by lack of knowledge. It is caused by lack of selection. You know too much and choose too little. Another key principle is preloading your thinking. Before entering fast environments, prepare mental anchors. These are core beliefs, frameworks, or messages you can return to at any moment. When pressure rises, your mind reaches for what is familiar. If you preload clarity, you retrieve clarity. If you preload doubt, you retrieve hesitation. Fast thinking also benefits from verbal placeholders. Instead of filling space with random words, use neutral phrases that buy time while maintaining confidence. Phrases like, "Let me frame this clearly," or "Here is the core idea," signal structure. They slow your internal clock without slowing the conversation. This is not manipulation. It is leadership. You are guiding the rhythm instead of being dragged by it. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to think and speak at the same time. This splits cognitive resources. The solution is micro-sequencing. Think first, then speak. Even half a second of internal organization changes everything. Listeners do not notice the pause. They notice the precision. Stories play a powerful role in fast communication. Facts require processing. Stories deliver meaning instantly. When time is short, use concrete examples. A short story can communicate a complex idea faster than explanation. This is why great communicators sound simple but land deeply. Emotional regulation is non-negotiable. Speed amplifies emotion. If frustration enters your voice, it spreads instantly. Learn to identify emotional spikes early. Tight shoulders, rapid breathing, mental looping. These are signals to reset. One breath, one posture adjustment, one grounding thought. Calm is contagious, just like chaos. Listening is part of fast thinking. Many people stop listening when preparing to respond. This creates misalignment. The fastest way to sound intelligent is to respond precisely to what was said, not what you assumed was said. Precision saves time because it prevents correction later. A powerful technique is reflective compression. You briefly summarize what you heard before adding your point. This shows understanding and buys thinking time. It also reduces resistance because people feel seen before being led. The mind loves patterns. Create personal patterns for common situations. When challenged, respond with curiosity before defense. When confused, ask clarifying questions before answering. When uncertain, state what you know and what you are exploring. Patterns reduce cognitive load because decisions are already made. The truth is, speed does not require brilliance. It requires preparation. Fast environments reward those who have done the thinking before the moment arrives. This is why experience matters. Experience is stored solutions ready for recall. But even without years of experience, you can train this skill. Practice answering questions aloud with time limits. Record yourself. Notice where clarity drops. Improve structure, not vocabulary. Simplicity scales under speed. The final insight is this. You do not need to say everything to sound smart. You need to say the right thing. When your thinking is clean, your words follow. Speed then becomes an ally, not an enemy. You speak quickly because you know where you are going, not because you are running from silence. This is how clarity survives speed. Through selection, structure, and calm intention. Chapter 17. Handling pressure conversations without losing authority. Pressure conversations are the moments that define reputations. They happen when stakes are high, emotions are charged, and outcomes matter. A negotiation that decides money, status, or trust. A confrontation where respect feels threatened. A public question that exposes uncertainty. In these moments, many people either become aggressive or invisible. Authority is lost in both cases. This chapter is about how to stay grounded, persuasive, and respected when pressure is heavy. Authority is not volume. It is not dominance. It is not winning the argument. Authority is emotional stability combined with directional clarity. People follow the person who appears calm, certain, and oriented toward solutions even when the situation is tense. The first step is redefining pressure. Pressure is not the situation itself. Pressure is the meaning you attach to it. When you interpret a moment as a threat, your body reacts defensively. Your voice tightens, your words narrow, and your thinking collapses. When you interpret the same moment as a challenge, your system opens. You become curious, strategic, and present. This reframing is not positive thinking. It is functional thinking. You ask yourself, what is required of me right now, instead of what am I about to lose? That single shift restores control. Breath is your first tool. Under pressure, breathing becomes shallow, which signals danger to the brain. Deep, slow breathing tells the nervous system that you are safe enough to think. One controlled breath before responding can prevent a cascade of reactive language. Posture follows. Authority is embodied before it is spoken. An upright, relaxed posture communicates readiness. A slouched or rigid body leaks insecurity or aggression. Adjusting posture is not cosmetic. It directly affects confidence and vocal tone. Language under pressure should become simpler, not more complex. People often try to sound smarter when challenged. This backfires. Complexity increases misunderstanding and reduces trust. Clear, short sentences signal confidence. You are not hiding. You are not overwhelmed. Silence is a powerful ally. Many people fear silence in pressure moments and rush to fill it. Silence actually increases perceived authority because it shows you are not rushed by emotion or intimidation. A brief pause before speaking centers attention on you, and your next words carry more weight. Another critical skill is separating the person from the issue. Pressure conversations often become personal even when the topic is not. When you respond to the issue rather than the emotion, you lower resistance. You acknowledge feelings without surrendering direction. You might say, "I understand the concern," while clearly stating your position. This is not weakness. It is control. Authority grows when people feel heard but not indulged. Questioning is more powerful than defending. When challenged, instead of immediately justifying yourself, ask clarifying questions. What specifically concerns you? What outcome are you aiming for? Questions shift the dynamic from confrontation to collaboration. They also give you information which strengthens your response. Tone matters more than content. A calm, steady tone can deliver hard truths without escalation. A sharp tone can turn even reasonable points into conflict. Train yourself to lower your voice slightly under pressure. It draws attention and signals confidence. One of the most overlooked aspects of authority is boundaries. Authority does not mean agreeing to everything. It means knowing where you stand and expressing it clearly. If a request crosses your boundary, state it calmly without apology. Apologies weaken authority when no wrongdoing occurred. Replace sorry with clarity. Preparation reduces pressure. Anticipate difficult conversations and rehearse key messages. Not scripts, but principles. Know what matters to you, what you can concede, and what you cannot. Pressure exposes unprepared minds. Finally, remember that authority is remembered after the conversation ends. People may forget exact words, but they remember how you made them feel. If you remained calm, respectful, and clear, you gain long-term influence even if the moment felt uncomfortable. Pressure does not destroy authority. Unmanaged emotion does. When you regulate yourself and communicate with intention, pressure becomes a stage where your leadership becomes visible. Chapter 18: Influencing others without sounding pushy or fake. Influence is often misunderstood. Many people associate influence with persuasion tricks or charismatic performance. As a result, they either overperform and sound fake or withdraw and avoid influence altogether. True influence is quieter. It feels natural because it aligns with human psychology rather than fighting it. This chapter focuses on how to influence others ethically and effectively without pressure, manipulation, or artificial charm. Influence begins long before you speak. It starts with how you think about the other person. If you see them as an obstacle, your tone reveals it. If you see them as a partner, your language opens doors. Trust is the foundation of influence. Without trust, even the best arguments fail. Trust is built through consistency, clarity, and care. Say what you mean. Do what you say. Chapter 19: Communicating confidence. When you do not feel confident, Confidence in communication is often misunderstood as a personality trait. People assume you either have it or you do not. The truth is less romantic and more empowering. Confidence is a skill you can perform before you actually feel it. This chapter is about learning how to communicate certainty, even when doubt exists inside you. Every confident communicator you admire has experienced insecurity. The difference is not the absence of fear, but the management of it. Confidence is not a feeling first. It is a behavior first. The feeling follows later. The mind constantly looks for evidence. When you act confidently, your brain receives feedback that you are capable. Over time, the internal state aligns with the external behavior. This means you do not wait to feel ready. You move while feeling uncertain. One of the biggest confidence killers is overthinking. When you mentally rehearse every possible outcome, you paralyze your ability to speak clearly. Confidence requires presence. Presence means attention is on the current moment, not imagined futures. Training presence is training confidence. Language choice is critical. Confident speakers avoid minimizing phrases. They do not say, maybe, sort of, I think, just, or hopefully. These words shrink authority. Replace them with clear statements. You are not claiming absolute truth. You are claiming clarity. Clarity feels like confidence to listeners, even if you feel nervous inside. Voice control is another powerful lever. Under insecurity, the voice often rises or speeds up. This signals uncertainty. Slowing down your pace and lowering your pitch slightly creates the perception of calm control. The body often needs to lead the mind. Eye contact is not about staring. It is about connection. Brief, steady eye contact while speaking reinforces self-trust. Looking away constantly suggests doubt, even when your words are solid. Practicing eye contact builds internal courage because it forces you to stay present. Structure builds confidence. When you know where you are going, your delivery becomes grounded. Use simple internal frameworks. Know your opening, your core message, and your closing. Even in spontaneous speaking, a loose structure prevents mental chaos. Humans associate confidence with decisiveness. This does not mean rigidity. It means the ability to choose a direction. Saying "here is what I recommend" is more confident than listing endless options without guidance. People look to communicators for orientation. Embrace imperfection. Trying to sound perfect increases anxiety. Confidence grows when you allow yourself to be human. Small pauses, slight imperfections, and natural expressions make you relatable and credible. Reframe nervous energy. The physical sensations of anxiety and excitement are similar. The difference is interpretation. When you label the sensation as readiness instead of fear, your performance improves. Your body is not betraying you. It is preparing you. Preparation remains essential. Confidence without preparation is arrogance. Preparation without confidence is hesitation. Balance both. Know your material well enough that you can speak flexibly rather than recite memorized lines. Finally, remember that confidence is contagious. When you speak with clarity and composure, others relax. Their relaxation feeds back into you. Confidence becomes a shared emotional loop. Confidence is not something you wait for. It is something you practice out loud. Chapter 20. Speaking with Purpose. In a distracted world, modern communication competes with noise. Notification screens, multitasking, and constant stimulation fragment attention. In this environment, speaking well is not enough. You must speak with purpose. Purpose cuts through distraction. Purpose gives your words gravity. This chapter focuses on how to communicate meaningfully when attention is scarce and patience is thin. Purposeful communication begins with intention. Before speaking, ask yourself why this message matters right now. If you cannot answer this clearly, neither can your audience. Purpose sharpens focus. When you know your purpose, you eliminate unnecessary words. Brevity becomes natural rather than forced. People respect speakers who value their time. The opening moments are decisive. Attention is won or lost quickly. Purposeful speakers begin with relevance. They connect immediately to a need, question, or outcome the listener cares about. This creates psychological buy-in. Emotional relevance sustains attention. Facts alone rarely hold focus. People stay engaged when they feel something. Purposeful communication integrates emotion without manipulation. You acknowledge reality, frustrations, hopes, or risks honestly. Signal importance through emphasis. Not every sentence deserves equal weight. Purposeful speakers highlight key points through tone, pacing, and repetition. This guides listeners on what to remember. Story remains essential, but discipline is required. Purposeful stories serve the message rather than entertain aimlessly. Each story answers why this matters. Irrelevant anecdotes dilute impact. Simplicity is respect. In a distracted world, complexity becomes a barrier. Clear language is not shallow. It is strategic. Purposeful speakers translate ideas into accessible language without losing depth. Listening becomes even more critical. When attention is fragmented, misunderstandings multiply. Checking for understanding prevents disconnection. Asking brief clarifying questions keeps alignment alive. Nonverbal presence anchors attention. A calm, focused demeanor contrasts with digital chaos. When you are fully present, you create a psychological pocket of attention around you. Ending with purpose is as important as beginning. Close with a clear takeaway or call to reflection. Give listeners something to carry forward. Purposeful endings extend impact beyond the moment. Communication with purpose is leadership. It signals that you value meaning over noise and direction over distraction. In a scattered world, this is rare and powerful. Conclusion: thinking fast and speaking smart. As a way of life, effective communication is not a collection of tricks. It is a way of relating to yourself and others. Throughout this journey, you have seen that thinking fast is not about speed alone. It is about clarity under pressure. Speaking smart is not about sounding impressive. It is about being understood and trusted. Communication reflects inner alignment. When thoughts, emotions, and intentions align, words flow with power. When they conflict, language becomes defensive or confusing. Mastery begins inside. Practice is non-negotiable. These skills grow through use, not theory. Each conversation becomes training. Each mistake becomes feedback. The goal is not perfection. The goal is presence, adaptability, and integrity. When you speak from these foundations, people listen even when they disagree. In a world full of noise, clear, honest communication becomes a competitive advantage and a human gift. Use it wisely. Speak with intention. Listen deeply. Think clearly. And let your words build understanding rather than confusion. This is how you think fast, speak smart, and communicate with impact wherever you go.